All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill. It's great to have you all back here again today. It has been a wacky weather week, as it always is in Toronto. You never know what you're going to fucking get next. But I think
like
the highlight
talking about the weather.
It feels like the natural introduction. I mean, I don't know why. It's not like I'm fucking British or something. I know that's like their default for like certain conversations, but I don't know. Fucking weather is a thing. I'm joined by my illustrious co-host k-libra. How you doing, k-libra?
I'm doing great. Zill, myself, and Katana, as well as Cobalt K, had gone to the Sonic Symphony last night.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I didn't know what to expect other than, an orchestra to make music, orchestral versions of music that I know. But holy shit. That was a hell of an experience when I think it's just the vocalist, but the vocalist of a small metal band called Seven Spires.
Yeah.
She fucking sang nearly all the tracks. God,
all the screamo and everything.
Yeah, when she said "Oh yeah, I come from heavy metal," I was like, I think I know what to expect for the rest of the night. I wonder how she's gonna hit it. She hit the notes really well, and
yeah.
I loved it when she did her metal growl and scream and shit. I'm like, fuck yeah! It was really good. Zill, you said you noticed parents were taking their kids out of the show.
Yeah, because it's funny. Like I also didn't know what to necessarily expect. I've gone to symphonies of video game music before, but usually it's just the orchestra all the way through. So the first half was like that, and I noticed that the crowd was quite rowdy already. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I wouldn't expect Sonic fans in particular to be the rowdy group, but okay. And then intermission happens. They come back, and all of a sudden a rock band comes out, and I was like, oh, now I understand. And yeah, there were literally parents who I guess also were surprised and didn't know that there was going to be rock songs and metal screaming. So they were ferrying their kids out. And these weren't little kids. These were 8, 10, 12-year-olds. I'm come on, guys. They'll be fine. I promise you. Nothing. They're not going to be corrupted by the metal Sonic music. I promise you.
They'll be enriched by it.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, it was half orchestra and half metal concert. And even the conductor of the orchestra had added his vocals to one of the songs. I think it was "Open Your Heart." I'm not sure.
I think it was, yeah.
But when I looked down from the screen and I noticed him at the mic, I was like, "What? Whoa! This is great! This is great! Absolutely wonderful!" And
the highlight, or the cherry on top, was that we literally watched, and I could not make this up if I wanted to. We watched as after the concert, after it just finished, the people in front of us proposed to each other.
Oh, yeah.
What are the fucking odds?
Wedding proposal.
With the gold ring, the Sonic gold ring. I was just oh my God.
It was very sweet. She said yes. They kissed, and it was lovely. So there was a wedding proposal. There was the people in the crowd who were like, "Oh man," it was like, "Thank you." And the conductor, as he was ready, just slowly puts his other hand out with a thumbs up, to respond while not looking at the crowd. There was the guitarist who his equipment stopped working, and then he was just like, "Shit happens." Actually, said "Shit happens." I'm like, "Great, I won." Absolutely wonderful, and I'm never going to forget it. You shouldn't forget to sign up for our Patreon either. Make sure to just take a look at it, see if it's something that's for you, if you want to be a part of our exclusive Discord, and you would just like to speak to like-minded or just differently minded people, just people who are into transformation, at least in general. We got a section for discussing ideas. We try to make sure that it's very nicely curated and taken care of. You got the Raisin Room, just think about that.
We love the Raisin Room. It's the best. I mean, the best thing about the Patreon through the Discord is you get to see everything of what I am. All of me. You get all of it. So.
Are you everyone, anywhere, anyhow, anywhere?
Yes.
Anyway,
yes. Oh, man. Well, it's a very interesting and special episode today because it's just Libra and I. And specifically, our patrons voted on a topic for us to chat about today. And it was a 4-way tie, I will disclose. And so because I'm a very biased source, I picked the one that was going to be the most interesting. I forget who it was who put it in. I think it might have been one of a kind. But someone put in us talking about Ratchet and Clank. And so here I am to talk to you about Ratchet and Clank because it has been a long time coming. I think the way I kind of wanted to posit this was essentially in my mind, I have this central thesis. And that central thesis is that Ratchet and Clank is a quintessential TF franchise. And I'm going to kind of try to walk everyone through why I think that is and, point to my evidence, as it were. And we'll just kind of have a conversation about it. So
you'll make your case for that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we transitioned from my childhood favorite to your childhood favorite.
Yeah. And this was very much a childhood favorite franchise of mine. I guess the way I kind of want to start off, and I guess, for context, for all the, the nerds who are very into Ratchet and Clank, full disclosure, I started actually playing with the PS3 games. If you think that diminishes my opinion, go fuck yourself. Now, that being said, we're going to actually start chronologically. And the first thing I kind of want to talk about is how Ratchet and Clank as a franchise was marketed to the masses, because from the very get-go, it was being shilled to audiences basically as a video game franchise that was not only different for a variety of reasons, but also involved transformation. In particular, during the PS2 era, there would be a lot of commercials that they would have where they're showing average, quote-unquote, average actor kids who are basically testing out weapons from the Ratchet and Clank games. And there were a variety of these, but the ones that always stood out the most, and I'm not, just saying that, you can check on YouTube, they usually have the most views. The ones that stood out the most were the transformation ads. One of the first ones they put out was the Morpho Ray, which was a weapon in the original game that would turn your enemies into chickens if you zapped them for long enough. And so this ad shows this group of kids, they're fooling around with this thing, they're joshing around, and they turn one of the friends into a chicken, and he's kind of oh, I don't know, how's this gonna work, blah blah, and then he's just bam, chicken. And, he's running around it's just a fucking chicken. And everyone's laughing. They're oh, fuck, what are we going to do with the chicken now? Blah, blah. But that was how the franchise was introduced to a lot of people. And I think one of the other ones that really stood out was there was a sheepinator weapon. Again, turn your enemies into sheep for the second and the third game. And that one was they're again, fooling around. We're going to try and turn something on a table into a sheep. And the mom kind of walks in from off screen and gets hit by the beam instead. And then she becomes a sheep. And this ad is really funny in particular because if you look very closely, one of the people in the ad is the fucking actor from The Big Bang Theory. And I noticed this only when I was rewatching this. And I was like, what the fuck? I know who that fucking is. But anyways, it's very oh God, what am I going to do? My mom's a sheep now, blah, blah, blah. And the other friends are laughing because they obviously don't give a shit. But he's genuinely distressed because he's what the fuck do I do? My mom's a sheep now.
Which actor was it for The Big Bang Theory?
Fuck. It's not Sheldon. I think, I don't know if it's Leonard. I'm literally looking this up. I see his face in my head, and that's not helping me right now. Is it Leonard? No, it's Howard. It's the guy who plays Howard. So the actor's name is Simon Helberg. But okay. Yeah, it's Howard from The Big Bang Theory in the fucking ad, and I was like, wait, what? What? There's okay, all right. I'm sure this is this is just a random fucking ad for a video game. I'm sure he was just building up his portfolio, but regardless, I was that's really fucking funny to me. yeah, there was those two. There was another one where a guy was kissing his girlfriend and they turned her into a cow, so then he's kissing a cow. And then there's a final one where this guy gets shrunk down to like mini size, and they're like, oh yeah, he's gonna go sneak into the girl's tent or something. But as he starts like running towards it, this eagle swoops in and just fucking picks him up and flies away with the guy. It's really fucking funny.
Okay. Now I have to wonder, because I only played one game, and it was Rift Apart.
Yes.
Which I'm sure we'll get to anyway. But now I'm wondering, are there people, or has there been at least one person on the team throughout the entire game's life? Is it like that one producer who wants the giant spider in every movie?
That is a good question. And I think you're going to have to explain the giant spider lore, because I'm
going to do my best, because it was explained to me yesterday by Cobalt K.
Yeah.
And there was apparently some movie producer, who wanted a giant spider in like every single movie, and he would always drop it and always get denied. Apparently, there was a story that was told by Kevin Smith, who had written a script for a new Superman movie that never happened, called Superman Lives, and he was working with this producer. This producer had mentioned that he wants Superman to fight a giant spider, and Kevin Smith straight up said, "This doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to do this, so we're not going to do it." And but who knows how much he would have pushed? And apparently the movie was going to be bad anyway. Kevin Smith hated the script, so it was a win for all. He finished it. It got shelved, but. This producer had kept wanting to do that throughout a bunch of movies, and he finally got his wish in Wild Wild West. The one with
which is still so funny to me.
Yes, the one with Will Smith. I forget who co-starred with him in that movie. It was Will Smith and somebody else that like most people knew. Was it Owen Wilson? I don't know why I'm thinking Owen Wilson.
I honestly do not remember.
Anyway, I can look this up later. But yeah, I'm wondering if there's just somebody who just keeps trying to put it in. It is a quirky cartoon thing, and even Gungeon has it. Gungeon has the Snake Maker, the Devolver, the Witch Pistol, and the Hexagun, and all of those change you into a chicken. What else did anything turn you into anything else? Like a frog or something?
There might have been a frog one.
Yeah, and of course snakes, because the Snake Maker and the Devolver would turn you into lesser forms, would turn enemies into their lesser forms, and you could turn them into the most primitive form that they can get, and they're almost harmless at that point. So yeah, it's a fun mechanic to just use it on your enemies.
Oh yeah,
but Ratchet and Clank doing it over and over and over and over and over again, and it's like this is the way I want to focus the ad campaign, and this is these I always got to have like a weapon or two or three. I don't know.
Oh, for some games there's definitely like a number of them. But to your point, the first 3 games were all directed by the same guy, and they did have on the writing team they had one person who was on it for all 3 games as well. So the director was Brian Algeyer. I hope I'm saying that right. And then John Lally was one of the writers who was on all 3. It's entirely possible. I don't want to like speculate necessarily. It could have been one of them. It could have been someone on like the programming team. I feel almost positive that there had to be someone amongst that group who was like really gung-ho about it, because it really does like manifest not only just in those original games, but like throughout the game series afterwards. Like it very much felt like, because this was established as a core part of like the DNA of their like wacky weapons, so to speak, that it then just like became an embedded thing forever after. And it must have been because someone pushed for it, because that's not something that I think, especially back in like 2002, like this game was seen very much as like, oh, like it stands out, it's very innovative, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it's a platformer, but like it's a platformer that's focused on having all these like zany weapons, and that was something that really elevated it. And clearly, the weapons turning people into things was one of the more off-the-wall ideas than, say, just standard guns and shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think the ads in particular, also, like, another thing I'll just mention about the ads is the way in which they're, like, directed. I feel like whoever was doing them also knew what the fuck they were doing, because one of the things that they really emphasize on that I think speaks to, like, an interest in it is, like, focusing in on the reactions of the people around the person who got transformed after the fact. So, you know, going back to the one with Howard from the Big Bang Theory, like, you know, there's like a big emphasis of in like the filming and everything when you're watching the ad of like, you know, he has this look of shock on his face and all the friends are laughing and they're like, oh, that's so funny, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, genuinely, guys, like, you know, that's my mom. What the fuck do I do now? Or even like with the chicken, like, you know, they're kind of like mocking him and being like, oh, yeah, you're just a stupid chicken now, blah, blah, blah. Like, not to like, you know, extrapolate a bit too much or read too much into things, but those kinds of reactions feel like something that would feel at home on like an old CYOC stories, I guess what I'm trying to say. And like the parallels did strike me to some degree in terms of like how they were focused on that.
I wonder how much of that is just incidental, because in a movie or any piece of like visual media, if you're changing into something, it's going to be a spectacular event. It doesn't matter what happens to you. You can't believe what you're seeing. So I think it's only natural. Also, it's a clever way to not have to focus too much on effects or lack thereof, things like that. But at the same time, then I can't help but wonder, because God damn it, the 80s had so many interesting ways of like including transformation in their stuff.
Oh yeah.
And you know, there are the people who went through the painstaking process of doing the practical effects and stuff like that, which people love. So that takes a certain kind of vision, and I'm never going to stop thinking about cat people, because it was an erotic fantasy and they made a movie out of it, and it was weird, and it was
someone's fantasy.
Yeah, the part where she turns into a panther at the end could not have just been somebody being like, that'd be cool. They made the scene as it was for a reason. He could have woken up and found a panther in his bed, and he could have been terrified at that, but nope, they made that choice. And to make sure that she was good and naked when it happened.
Oh, I was gonna say someone was really into panther titties, so you know, I mean, hats off to them.
They didn't grow. The chest like barreled out. And
of course, but you know, we had to focus on that while it was changing. You know, like
yes.
I'm like, okay, buddy, I know what you're into. That's fine. I'm here for that too. Don't you worry. But also, like, I know what you're doing.
I think you can actually find the transformation on YouTube, but I ain't gonna show that because I don't know how the fuck people slip by and don't get caught.
Yeah, fuck if I know.
Anyway, back to Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah, so, you know, I guess obviously those commercials I think really set the tone, but like I said, I feel like because they had those kinds of weapons at the very beginning, it ended up being something that got embedded into all the games moving forwards. And there's like a few that I wanted to pull out that I remember that really stood out to me. So there was a one called the Quack Array, of course, caused Duck TF, similar vein to like the sheep and the chicken ones. I think that was in like the third or the fourth game, something like that. Very good, very effective. Now, there was this weapon called the Critter Strike that I found really interesting because it would TF like some of the enemies into different things depending on what kind of enemy it was. So sometimes it might result in like little mini T-Rexes like TF, and then sometimes it would result in pig TF, which is like two completely different ends of the spectrum. And I forget what the exact conditions were to cause it, but I thought that was, you know, an interesting way to do it. And another one that built on that was a weapon called the Chimp-O-Matic, which if you were attacking an organic, like, you know, enemy, it would turn them into a monkey. And if you were attacking like a robot enemy, it would turn them into like an inanimate like monkey clapping kind of toy. Which again, I'm like, that's clever. You know, it's like, oh, it is going to turn them into a chimp, but depending on what they started on, you'll get two different results. Like, again, that's like the kind of thing where it's like someone was very much clearly thinking about like, how do we do this in a way that is interesting, and also thinking about like the ramifications from a more like cause and effect perspective, which again, I'm like, I feel like someone maybe knew what they were doing. The Chimp-O-Matic one really stands out as one of them. And there were like a lot of other wacky ones too that they did, more like off the wall ones. So to give an example from the most recent game, there was a weapon called the Topiary Sprinkler, which would TF your enemies, at least for like a period of time, into plants. And basically they would get frozen in place, and like their bodies would sprout leaves all over it, and then there'd be like a little sprinkler that would come out of nowhere just to like water the plant, which is very funny. And the point of the weapon was that, you know, it would immobilize the enemy, and then you could just fire at them, and you could get like some additional damage because they're, you know, stuck as a plant. Plants have less HP. But again, like, you know, the little detail, like, implying that the water is like feeding the TF and being one of the triggers.
It does change them repeatedly.
It does.
When you upgrade it, it keeps spraying for longer, and enemies that got frozen once will change back, and then a couple seconds later, they'll get frozen again like 1 or 2 more times.
Yeah, which is great. I'm like, again, like, and one of the funny things I noticed for some of the specific boss enemies, if you use it on them, sometimes they will actually sprout little flowers over where their eyes are. Which is like a cute detail, like on the face of it. If you think about it a bit more, it's a bit more, oh fuck. But I thought that was really cool. And also in the newest game, they had the pixelizer weapon, which is, I guess, to some degree an inanimate TF, whereby the more you like fire this weapon at the weapons, the less corporeal the enemy becomes, and they become like reduced essentially to pixels, and if you actually get them all the way, you end up turning them into just like a chunk of blocks that you can kick over, which again, like, super terrifying if you think about it for too long, but it's like, oh, it's cutesy, whatever. And it's funny to me how like they did manage to work in like a very low level of body horror, in the sense of like, it's not something that's visible, but if you think about the consequences for some of these, it's like, oh, that's actually really fucked up, and you're doing this to people, like, and it's like, oh, you know, it's like a teen kids game, yeah, whatever, and it's like, you are murdering people in terrible ways.
Yeah, you get the Super Mario Brothers consequence of it. Everybody's bricks. Yes, everyone got turned into bricks.
Yeah.
And also, there's another gungeon weapon. I forgot that. I don't remember which gun it was anymore, but it glitches you out. So you glitch the enemies out, and depending on your luck, you might just glitch them out of existence. It's great.
That's amazing.
But even if it can't one-shot bosses, the bosses will get all fucking corrupted and everything for the entire fight. It's great.
Oh my god, that's amazing. Yeah, there's just so many cool ones. I think there was also a winterizer one, which was very much supposed to be a joke, but it would turn your enemies into snowmen. I think that was in. Like,
I was thinking there had to be a snowman type thing, because when you mentioned the flowers growing out of the eyes, I thought it's not much different from putting little pebbles in a snowman head.
It's not. It's honestly not. Yeah, that was, I think, Into the Nexus, which very underrated. People should play that game more.
Okay, so wait, important question. How good were those weapons? I played Rift Apart. The Topiary Sprinkler was extremely fucking good. Yes. And I didn't really get to use the pixelizer all that much, because they had a Gatling gun, and no other weapon matters when I get one.
Well, I think the pixelizer is pretty good in the sense of it was a second shotgun in terms of how it functioned. You do get a regular shotgun pretty early on, but there's obviously a limited amount of ammo you can have for it. And it's good for crowd control. So if you get the pixelizer, it's basically a second option. So, you know, if you run out of ammo in one, you can go to the other and vice versa. Yeah. That one just has like the TF flavor twist. Some of the other ones were less good. So, I mean, like the Morpho Ray, the Quacko Ray, and the Sheepinator were okay. I found that sometimes you had to hold them down too long for some of the bigger enemies, and at that point it's like, well, I would be better served if I was just using fucking rockets or something at that point. The Chimp-O-Matic, I remember, was pretty good. The Critter Strike was in All for One. I forget how good it was, to be honest. The Winterizer was more of a joke than anything, honestly. It wasn't, like, terribly effective, but I would fucking use it because I'm like, that's fucking funny, and it's also TF. But Pixelizer and Topiary Sprinkler definitely stand out, and the Mutator one, which was in one of the PSP spin-offs, that one was also apparently very good, although unfortunately I've not played that game, which, sad face.
Did they just like poof into the forms and then change back after a little while, or is that it for them with some of the weapons where they change and like well, you consider them eliminated?
So for the ones in those OG ads, those are like you're eliminated, like you are just the animal now. That's it. For the Winterizer one, they actually would TF back after a certain amount of time unless you killed them. Same with Pixelizer. We already mentioned the Topiary Sprinkler had like kind of an on-off focus. I don't remember for some of the other ones if it was like permanent or if like it was only for a temporary duration, but they were for the most part poof TF, which I understand, like especially from like a game model perspective, it's really difficult to create models that are like going to be that versatile, particularly when they have to affect a wide array of different enemies. The one that does stand out, though, as actually having a progression to it was the Pixelizer and the Topiary Sprinkler, because the Pixelizer one, it like you would have to have multiple bursts, and as like with each burst, the enemy would get less and less human, and like their sounds would get more and more muted as if they were like fading away. Like that one, that I would definitely say had progression to it. And the Topiary, you actually saw it, like the TF happen, even if it was very quick, it was still very much like, oh, visibly I saw the leaves grow, and it was like progressed.
It doesn't just poof all over, it trails from the point of impact of the water and then spreads out over everything quickly.
Yeah. So I would say that one is good. Yeah.
Oh, just another thing, because I know I keep bringing up Gungeon, because it's guns that turn you into stuff.
It's good.
Regarding consequences, because you said that the animals get changed, some of them get turned into animals, and that's it. They're considered gone. In the Gungeon, with something like the Hexagon or Witch Pistol, what they'll get turned to is chickens, and the chickens are completely harmless, but you can attack them if you want to. And when you do, they just like they cluck loudly one last time and just burst into feathers. Like yeah, it's fucked up. Very fucked up if you want to do that.
They let you do that in the Ratchet and Clank ones too.
Oh, okay.
If you want to, they're like, yeah, that's fine. You can get a little extra few $5 from it if you want.
Oh, extra money? Yeah.
You get extra money. Shit. So it's like, I mean, it's like the system for currency, the economy in Ratchet and Clank is completely fucked. You need like thousands of bolts to be able to buy anything, so $5 isn't going to do much of anything. But I mean, it all adds up eventually, and if you're going to be a completionist, then I'm going to fucking whack you with my wrench again to get a little more money, because fuck you. But yeah, that's like kind of the weaponry stuff that I wanted to touch on to kind of set the stage. The next thing I kind of want to point to in terms of this being very much like a TF franchise, though, is the third game in particular, Up Your Arsenal, a wonderful title with definitely no double entendres.
None of the titles have double entendres.
Oh, none of them. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Erase that from your mind. So the plot for that one is literally revolving around the central villain wanting to transform literally everyone in the universe into robots. The villain is Dr. Nefarious, who shows up many times throughout the series after his introduction in this game. But his original goal is to transform everyone into robots. And he does have, like, some success at, like, certain points with, various, like, other planets that they didn't get to in time, stuff like that. But, like, the plot in particular centers around, like, this central tension of, like, in terms of magnitude of how bad this is. Like, this is a universe that we already know is populated by many robots. So with both Ratchet and Clank, there's like almost this like tension to some degree of like, well, okay, how bad actually is that to be a robot? Like, is that really a terrible thing versus like, well, obviously you're taking away someone's bodily autonomy, so that's bad from that perspective. But it's like this kind of like discussion that plays out throughout the course of the game that I think is interesting. I think they could have probably been a bit more nuanced with it, to be frank. I think they were more focused on other things, which is fine. But like the plot of this entire game revolved around transformation. And it's funny, there's an Easter egg in a later game where you can actually have Ratchet turn into a robot. It doesn't happen in this game, at least as far as I remember, but they bring the central like MacGuffin from this game back in a later one, where if you fuck up, he can get transformed into a robot, which I think is very fun. Yeah, you can have a bad end in one of the later games. It's Into the Nexus again. There's like this part where they're like, oh, we have like this museum that's dedicated to like all the past enemies that were threats to the galaxy that have been defeated, and we have their like stuff on display, and in one of them we have a simulation of this weapon that was going to turn everyone into robots, except oops, it actually works, and if you fuck up you can get transformed into a robot. So, which is funny, and then you get the old game over, whatever. But like, it's not game over because Ratchet is dead or something. It's just he just got turned into a robot, and he's like, "Fuck, what the hell do I do now?" But like that threat comes up more than once during the like third game itself, and I think that, you know, especially given the first two games had that central tenet of like, oh, we have all these crazy wacky weapons that turn people into things, to then have the third entry in the franchise literally be all about, oh, what would happen if everyone got mass TF'd, and like we're going to watch as this happens to certain groups of people like as the game progresses, like that's a TF game. Like I don't see any other way to view that otherwise.
Okay, so what is the consequence of being a robot? Does Nefarious end up having control over their will?
Yeah, to some degree he does.
Some degree?
Yeah, so the way that it's kind of like pitched, it's a bit inconsistent in the game. There are some where it's portrayed as, oh, yeah, they got turned into a robot, but because they're kind of like, you know, it's not important to Nefarious, he's not actually going to like mind control them or do anything. But in other cases, when it's like, you know, an important ally or what have you, they do show him as like having the ability to control them. So there's like this kind of like inconsistency in terms of like, obviously he wants to dominate and like rule the galaxy, etc., but it's unclear as to like how far those like mind control powers went, because we do see examples where certain creatures do get transformed and they're just like, I forget what exactly the lines is. We might have like a clip of it, but it's like, oh no, I got transformed into a robot and I still have to go to work or whatever. Like there is that like kind of tonal inconsistency. Yeah, it's very silly. It's being played for laughs, obviously. Yeah, that's fine. Even though it's, you know.
I just wanted to know because for instance, Dr. Wily in later media has been, it pointed out the fact that he'll make these robot masters and he'll make these really strong robots like Base, and Base will reject him because he gave him free will, and it's like, why would you do that? And even in Worlds Collide, where Robotnik and Wily were working together, Robotnik was like, you're telling me you make these things? He also commented on it as like, the key is to not give them any free will, you idiot. It's really funny.
Yeah.
So I can imagine Nefarious just doing like the Wily thing of making that mistake, but also making the Robotnik mistake of, I'm going to do this thing and I will have complete power over it. The consequences of what I do are to be figured out maybe after. I don't know.
Yeah. And you know, I can't, it's funny because obviously Dr. Nefarious is a very campy villain. I mean, they got Quark from Deep Space Nine to voice him, which
it was so good.
So fucking good. I just love that man. Armin Sherman, bless you. He's very much like played up as a hammy villain, megalomaniac, all that good stuff. But he also like puts like some interesting points forward in the sense of like, I'm basically giving you guys immortality, so why are you complaining? Which is like a very interesting angle to come at it from, because he's like, you know, obviously, well, if you're a robot, you know, if something happens to you, you can just get fixed up. Like, barring like, complete destruction or something, of course. But like, yeah, you're never gonna have to like deal with any like, oh, I'm hungry, oh, whatever, I need sustenance. You don't need that shit anymore. You don't need to worry about atmosphere or any of that shit. Weather, who is she? I don't know her. Like, you can live forever now. All you have to do is like submit to me ruling the galaxy. And like, obviously we're all like, no, fuck that. But like, it is kind of interesting how he does actually like try, at least to some degree, to like persuade people that this is like the right thing to do. And then like on the other side, he has this whole propaganda effort going on with this stand-in who's very clearly like a Britney Spears analog, who's like trying to use her popularity and media savvy to convince all of the robots that currently exist to like rebel and fight back against organic life, because we got to destroy them if they're not going to like allow themselves to be transformed, blah blah blah. Very, very aughts humor, but it stands out as like, again, thinking about like all the different angles of like, oh, how can I like maybe persuade people that they should be TF'd versus like threaten them if they don't get TF'd, and like all these other angles to it. Like, it was very much, he thought out all the different ways he could potentially game out trying to get all these people to transform, be it willing or unwilling. So,
I know that when it comes to being roboticized is often the thing of free will most of the time, being used as a tool or a weapon or a slave or something like that. It's usually that to become a machine is often synonymous with losing yourself completely to like the will of something else. And but yeah, it is funny because he sweetened the pot by not completely taking away fruit. Like, you'd have to submit to him, but you'd have to decide to do it, which is, it's almost an election campaign, but with like, I'm gonna try to steal this anyway, because I need to, because I want it.
That's really funny, actually. I didn't really think of it that way, but that's a good fucking analogy.
It's kind of like the I just think of also Interspecies Reviewers. There was a subplot that never got resolved, where demons want to run for office. All right, the demonic race. Yes, demons want to run for office, and they run on a platform of very desirable social and economic changes. I'm not kidding.
I believe it.
They're running their platform, but they're demons. And nobody wants demons to be in office. So like, but this is what we want, and we would help them. How can we convince people that they want us in office? Wait a minute. Have you heard of these guys that are going to bordellos and cat houses and giving their reviews? We got to set them up to say some good stuff about us. And I really wish I would. Maybe they finished it in the manga or something, because the whole story never got fully animated.
Yeah, you never know. But yeah, I think the fact that, the plot of this game revolved around it, there were interesting questions pitched in like, the mind control element of like, identity death sort of stuff. Like, I think the fact that this was all kind of wrapped up into like a very core part of this story. Again, that was like, it was the third game in the franchise, and at the time when it came out, it was very much considered like the best one yet, and there's definitely still people who believe it is like probably the best game in the series. I wouldn't say I'm one of them, but I still think it's like one of the best. Like, I think the fact that all like built on like kind of the stuff I illustrated before with the PS2 games that came before it, like, it's at that point I think it's pretty much firmly established to be in like TF franchise territory to some degree. Okay. I think the other thing I'll mention though, and this is something that happens throughout all of the games, is there are like a number of transformations that happen to main characters in particular, outside of like, weapon wackiness and stuff, that I think also like kind of like plays into this. So there's a few that come to mind. I already mentioned the robot TF for Ratchet in the Into the Nexus one, where you get the bad end. I think that's a great example. In the 2016 game, that was like a reboot reboot / remake of the original game. I don't really know what to call it. Nobody really knows what to call it. We try to pretend it doesn't exist. But anyways, in that game, there's actually the main villain, spoilers for a game that came out like almost a decade ago. The main villain in like the last act actually gets transformed into a sheep via the Sheepinator. But like he's the main villain of the entire game, and he gets fucking sidelined because they wanted to shoehorn in Dr. Nefarious into the story. Aww. And like I have thoughts as to like how that works from a story perspective.
Trust me, I feel that way about Twilight Princess. Another game that's about transformation big time.
Yeah.
And the entire time you're like, there's this new villain, there's these new characters, there's this new setting, there are these new ideas. Ganondorf is back. Fuck this game.
Back. Fuck everything else.
Fuck this game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it was also like I'm gonna get into the decision, I guess. Like the whole first game. Again, I'm not actually a big fan of the first game. The original 2002 one. Boo me if you want. Throw tomatoes. I don't give a fuck. I said what I said. But that game had an iconic villain in it. Like he was a very good villain. Whatever you have to say about that game. So to reinterpret him in a way that made him a little less good, and then also to fucking sideline him at the last moment so that you could just self-insert Dr. Nefarious again. It's like, come on, guys, what are we doing here? Like seriously, like
I hate that. I always hate it. Yeah, they have to bring back the thing and bring it back to status quo, and it's not even that sort of thing where you're like, how are you going to figure in at the end? Certainly you are. You always literally do, and I'm okay with that. But how are they going to do it? But it really is just the complete sharp left turn.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. Why did you? What committee thinking resulted in this shit?
I would love to know, because it was not a great creative decision. But I will say, at least on the Sheep TF front for him, they do actually like they kind of, I don't want to say they salvage it later on, but like they do make a kind of funny joke about it later on in Rift Apart, because there's a sheep that's just always at the bar that you go to in Rift Apart. And it is very, very heavily implied to be the same guy. So the fact that they kind of like were like, okay, yeah, we did this bad decision, whatever, but this is how he's coping with it now. Like, yeah, he's a sheep, but he's just drinking at the bar all the time because what the fuck else is he gonna do? And no one questions it. I think that's kind of funny. That's an interesting little post.
No idea, and I kind of want to see it now.
I'll have to show you.
Because obviously, I'm just there, and I'm walking by everything. Anything I could possibly appreciate right past me, you know.
Well, something that you can appreciate is Gundam TF, because there's a good chunk of that in all of the games too. In particular, in the PS2 games, there are a number of times where Clank will TF into like basically Gundam, and Ratchet will actually ride around on his back, so we have the whole switching of roles thing going on. But yeah, he becomes a big fuck off robot that fucking storms around shooting shit and blowing shit up, and it's great. And they show him like actually TF. Like I think usually the way they do it is like his feet would get completely massive, disproportionate to the rest of him, and then he would kind of like spin around, and then like his arms would change, and then his body would buff up, and then that like all the armature around his head would show up. Like it's really cool stuff, and that's like very much a progression. Yeah, I'm sure I'll have a clip to show. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And there's also like in some of the earlier games, there was two that I'll call out that I also think were very interesting. So there's a vacuum TF in the third game, which but it's it's played as a gag, even though it's kind of mildly horrifying if you think about it too long. Not to get too much into it, but like Dr. Nefarious creates like an evil version of Clank called Clunk, that he has like. He kidnaps Clank and like subs in Clunk so that he's like going around with Ratchet for a period of time, not knowing that like, my best friend's actually a spy and he's evil and whatever. Yeah. And eventually they figure it out, and he breaks out Clank, and they like defeat Clunk or whatever. But at the end of the game, they turn Clunk into a vacuum cleaner. Like Ratchet's just casually using him to like clean his fucking apartment. And I'm like, what the fuck? That was a person. What? He's a vacuum now. Again, mildly horrifying, played for laughs. There's that one, and then there's also there's like a mutant TF actually in the second game
what
where
TF?
they mutate one of the creatures into like a terrible, horrifying monster. It starts out as like a little cute thing, and I forget like what exactly it was that they did to it. They were trying to like, it was like a created animal that they were testing. So obviously the analogy of what they were going for is very clear.
Lab animal got
lab animal testing on. Bad, you know,
turned into a monster.
Turned into a monster, and that's the final boss for that game.
Oh,
so like it's cool. It's a cool monster design, in my opinion. I think they did a good job with it.
Okay. Question: does Clank get a V-fin on his head when he changes?
No.
No.
He doesn't,
okay. I was just wondering. Some people are they want to do the Gundam thing, so they will either imply or just put a V-fin right on the fucking head, and it's like, yeah, you just wanted to show that little bit because you know what that really means.
Yeah,
that's what it makes people think of. It's not like other famous robots in anime haven't had one, but that's the example people are going to think of if they know about giant robots.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a really fun sequence though. There's also, so again, spoilers for a game that came out. I guess it came out 3 years ago. So maybe skip this part if you haven't played Rift Apart yet. There's a dimensional counter to Clank called Kit in the game, and she also gets a Gundam TF, and she's fucking great. I love Kit. She's a great character. But it comes kind of like, if you haven't played the previous games, it does kind of come as a bit of a surprise because she's traveling around with Ratchet for a period of time, and there's this moment where like it looks like, oh, everything's lost, blah blah blah, and he's like, oh, we have to let's just run away and like save our hides and fight another day. And she's like, no, I got something I got to do, but you should stand back or whatever. And she actually the force of her transformation actually flings Ratchet backwards, which is a great fucking little detail. Like her actual like body expanding fucking hits him because he wasn't expecting it, and then she's like, killer badass robot shooting things, which is great. She's a good character. One thing actually, since I'm thinking about Rift Apart, there's also a hidden TF in Rift Apart that you will miss if you don't look closely enough. But it's one of those things where I'm like, again, you guys fucking knew what you were doing. In the opening sequence of the game, there's a period where everything goes to shit. Dr. Nefarious is back, and he's trying to do some fuck shit, and now all the dimensions are getting fucked up. And there's a part where, as you're running along, there's a group of civilians that come out of this building. It's like a transit station or something, and they're running out of the building, and because of like the dimensional instability, there's like this pulse that comes from one of the breaches, and a bunch of the civilians who are running away get transformed into plants. Like, it happens like this. If you're not looking, you miss it. But if you are paying attention, you literally see all of them turn into plants. And again, I'm like, that's fucking cool. And also, you fucking know what you're doing, because that's a blink and you miss it thing. Like, that's a very subtle detail that you would not see unless you were paying attention. And the first time I saw it, I was like, wait, what? And I literally, because of the way the PS5 works, it always is like saving like the last few minutes of your gameplay. So I clicked on one of those and I watched it again, and I was like, literally the Leonardo DiCaprio meme of like, oh fuck, there it is. It's great. I guess the last one I'll mention that I think is really cool is in many of the games, not only the OG games, but also like the PS3 games, Rift Apart, etc. There are hologuises that you can have, and even though they're not strictly portrayed as like the person is actually transforming into whatever they're disguised at, in terms of functionality, they're using the game model for this other form. You can only interact in the same way, so like your height is reduced, the camera angle goes down if you're a small thing, or up if you're a big thing. The way in which you can interact with the world around you is different based on whatever form you're disguised at. Okay. In my opinion, that's functionally a TF, even though they're not saying like, oh, you transformed, whatever. Like, because of the way you end up having to interact, it is. Yeah. Like, you basically are.
When you say disguise, it often means that it's broken the moment you have to do anything that doesn't involve it. But if you could do all the things that the other form does, then yeah, you've essentially turned into it.
Yeah, pretty much. So I always thought those are cool. And those are in like almost all the games. So, whatever game you pick up from the franchise, it's going to have one of those in it. But yeah, I mean, the fact that, we have major characters that will get transformed at various points, the fact that, one of the game's entire plots revolves around it, all the weapons, the way in which it was presented to the audience as a whole, I think all of these are encompassing in terms of making this like a TF franchise. But I would also argue that like any good TF franchise will also reflect on the changes that we all undergo over time that stem both from TF experiences and non-TF experiences. And I know, people might say, oh, character development is not really a TF. And to that I say, again, fuck you. I think it is. And I think in particular, both Ratchet and Clank and Dr. Nefarious all have really interesting character development kind of journeys, as it were.
Character arcs?
Character arcs. Thank you. Words. They have very interesting character arcs that I think speak to the ways in which, experiences change us and such. And I, as a big surprise, the Lombax really likes Ratchet's character arc. Truly a stunning revelation.
Well, you couldn't have to. Some characters, they just
I guess.
Like, I don't... Like, okay, for Devil May Cry fans, Dante doesn't have a character arc.
That's true, actually.
He doesn't have one!
He doesn't have one.
Not allowed to have one.
He is the same person.
Ratchet could easily... It's funny, because despite all the obviously cartoony shit, and I don't mean that in the... in just the surface level way, a cartoon is generally meant to have things return to the status quo, so you could do all kinds of gags and situations with them. But they decided that this character will be a certain way, and then they kept making games, and we're like, well, let's have him go through this and come out the end differently, and then by the next game, that still mattered.
Yeah.
So it is actually a surprise to know that you like Ratchet's character arc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, continue, sorry.
I was going to say, there's just lots of games where they don't have it. Mario doesn't have a character arc. Sonic doesn't even get a character arc.
That's true, actually.
Yeah, they don't really get one because they have to return to the status quo. Dr. Robotnik was denied a character arc, despite the end of Sonic Adventure 2, which made me question, how are the rest of the games gonna go? Yeah. Okay. It's not a surprise. People could be like, oh, duh. No, it could have easily not been like that at all. Credit to the entire franchise that you can say that and stick by it, and then watch and play the newest game and say, oh, all that stuff from like a long time ago, look at how it manifested and how they wrote it into his character and all that stuff. And that's really fucking cool. And I want more of that. Ian Flynn, you're a cool guy. I am really hoping that people will listen to you and that you'll get to do something nice for Sonic.
I hope so, too.
It would be very good. It would be very good, please. Thank you.
I am praying for this for you. Yeah.
Hey, he can fix Shadow. I believe he can fix Shadow, so...
I believe so, too.
Everybody give Ian Flynn your support, your continued support. If you don't know who he is the current writer for the IDW Sonic comics, wrote a bunch of Archie Sonic issues toward the end of his life, and also is the reason Sonic Frontiers had a good story. Yeah. So, do it, everybody. This is the Sonic and Ratchet episode.
It is.
Mostly Ratchet.
I love that. I really do hope that he fixes my husband, because Shadow deserves better. But yeah, I think one of the things, like, the thing to crystallize what I mean by Ratchet having a character arc, in the first game, he's somewhere between, like, 16 and 18. In the most recent game, he's in his mid-30s, okay? Yeah. And, like, this is canon. Like, they reference time passing multiple times, and he, like, especially in the most recent one, he's like, I'm too old for this shit, which is really funny. I feel like many people in their 30s would agree, yes, we are too old for this shit. But, you know, like, in the first game, he is an asshole, to be frank. Like, he's just a fucking jerk. He's, snarky for the sake of being snarky. He's too edgy and too cool for people. He's a fucking dick sometimes. There are people who desperately need help in situations, and he's like, go fuck yourself. No one helped me, so I'm not helping you. And Clank's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, of course we should go help those people, and I don't give a shit if you're, like, all, like, too jaded and whatever. We're gonna go fucking do something about it. He is an asshole towards Clank, too. He threatens his life multiple times throughout the game. Like, people talk about, like, they have this, like, buddy-buddy friendship now, but, like, the first game was nothing like that at all. It was like, damn, these two really are just together right now because of convenience and circumstance and nothing else. There is, like, no love lost with them until towards basically the very end, where Ratchet, having gone through the arc of just that one game, is like, okay, this is actually someone that maybe I should be, some level of caring towards. I'll actually go save his ass, and we'll go kick this guy's ass too, the villain. And he's like, by the end of the game, he's like, yeah, you can come chill with me, whatever. Just don't be too nerdy or whatever. And again, like, that's an interesting kind of, again, not going back to the status quo. And that continues into the other games. Throughout all the PS2 games, he is still, like, he retains some of his, like, asshole-ish tendencies to some degree, but, like, he's clearly getting better over those games. And when you hit the PS3 games in particular, because they wanted to focus the plot more about, like, his backstory and where he came from and all this shit, he goes through this really interesting, conundrum where he's being kind of tantalizingly promised, you're the only lombax in this dimension or whatever, and maybe you could go and find where the rest of your people went and find what happened to them, all this stuff. And he learns some of this information, but one of the things that he comes to in terms of realization when he's kind of faced with a choice is that he has more of himself now where he is than anything that could have been with all these other lombaxes, because he's built his own family, he's made all of these friendships and connections and such, and so he ends up actually spurning it when he's given the choice. And that kind of flows into some interesting ramifications as well. I'm going to harp on Into the Nexus again for a second, because I think it's one of the best games in the franchise from a writing perspective. In that game, Ratchet is confronted with the villain of that game, whose name is Vendra, and she's very much like his foil in the sense of she's also been, like, cast out from her people, or, like, separated, and she really wants to get back to them, and she really wants to, like, make that connection, and she is actually successful to some degree in doing that, and then finds out, actually these people were nothing like what I imagined, and they don't actually really give a shit about me. I'm just a means to an end now for their own plans. And Ratchet, even in the PS3 games, in the previous one in Crack in Time, he also meets another lombax who also ends up not being what he expected. So by the time you get to Rift Apart, when they're talking about, like, maybe this is a chance to meet other lombaxes. Look, there's this rivet now, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I feel really anxious about this, actually, because I fucking almost... The last lombax I met killed me. Like, straight up killed me. So, maybe I'm a little bit leery of this. I have a little bit of PTSD related to that. I'm, like, really anxious about this possibility. I don't really know if it's worth it. I fucking gave up on it a long time ago. Like, all of these things wrap into these fucking 2+ decades of story and, like, have developed him into the character he is by the time we get to the most recent game. And I think that the way in which they handled that journey was just really well done. I have thoughts as to, like, some of the things they leave out. Like, I wish some of the stuff was a bit more explicit in the text instead of having to read into a lot of subtext, but, putting that aside, like, all the building blocks are there. And, again, this is built off of all the experiences he has had, which include TF, for the record. But they all build up off of the experiences that he's had over, like, 2+ decades, to the fact that now he's in his mid-30s. He's tried to retire from this fucking galaxy-saving hero business because he's like, I'm fucking done with it. He's tried it, like, 2 or 3 times, and he keeps getting dragged back into it. And he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I just want to fucking live. And again, that's, like, such an interesting take on this character that at the beginning was just pitched as, like, he's this guy who's, like, kind of an asshole, but he wants to be a hero, but he kind of just wants the hero stuff, and now he's like, I don't want any of that shit. Just fucking leave me alone. And yet he still keeps getting dragged back into it.
Mm-hmm. And somehow ends up being, how should I put it? He could just be really exhausted all the time. Like, I don't remember if it was, no, not fucking Die Hard. God damn it! I'm forgetting the fucking movies. One's with Danny Glover in them. Where it's pretty much that made him pretty much have the catchphrase "I'm too old for this shit." But it could have been that
Lethal
all the
Weapon.
time. Yeah, Lethal Weapon. I was just like, there was only one Die Hard movie. What the fuck am I thinking? But yeah, the Lethal Weapon movies. Just I'm too old for this. It could have been that. Thankfully, it wasn't. So it was fun to watch him go through it again and him caring about the stakes and also being interested and invested in all that stuff instead of just being desperately trying to find a way out. Which is funny because that would have been him in the first game. Do you agree?
Oh, 100%. That's 100% him in the first game. He's like, no, fuck this. I don't give a fuck.
Oh, you know what? That's funny because that's a horseshoe. He doesn't give a fuck, and so he doesn't want this. And now he gives a fuck, but he doesn't want this.
Yeah. That's a really great point. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. And I think also, like, the fact that he's still, like, optimistic or friendly to some degree by, like, the time he's getting all of these things. Like, again, he's, like, he cares about the stakes. It's very easy to just be like, I'm just going to fucking do what I need to do so that we can get to the end of this. No, like, actively throughout this journey, he is also being kind. He chooses to be kind now instead of choosing to be an asshole, which was, easier. And the fact that he does that in, like, the most recent game, again, some people are like, oh, he's not edgy like he used to be before. And it's like, of course he's not, because he's not 17 anymore. He's a fucking adult, and he's gone through shit. Of course he's not going to be fucking edgy, snarky all the fucking time. He still has his snark, don't get me wrong. But also he's like, yeah, I don't need to be an edgy teenager all the fucking time. Like, I'm 35. Fuck this shit, Like, Jesus.
He wants to get some Let's Plays out of Zill. just maybe not the entire game, but, Zill plays some Ratchet and Clank for the TFTuesday Podcast fans.
I'm fucking down. I would be down to do it. I would be going off about the story. So
tell us if you want that. If you really, really want it. Do you want it that badly?
Vote in the comments. Vote in the Patreon.
Play for me.
But yeah, I think he has such a fascinating character arc overall. I have done some, like, readings into it that I definitely don't think were put there by the writers, but I think particularly the PS3 era games, like, they very much can be a queer allegory of, like, searching for where you fit in and then finding a found family and that building around you and all that stuff. I think, like, there are a lot of really interesting themes and subtext to these games that, again, like, they're not even necessarily marketed in that way, but they choose to put in more than is expected, and I always respect that.
Yeah.
And it makes them, it's a reason why they have a special place in my heart. And, I spent a lot of time harping on Ratchet, but Clank also has a pretty good character arc too, in my opinion. He very much starts off being like, oh, we have to do the good thing, blah, 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 which, that's great. I'm not saying he, like, lost that in any way, but he's also very, like, aloof and disconnected from the rest of the world. Like, they very much start him off as, like, the classic fish out of water. I'm, like, the straight man, and I'm dealing with this snarky asshole now, and I'm just trying to do the right thing. But this guy, I have to, like, drag him along. And as he goes through the games, like, they build up more of an authentic partnership, but he also grows, too, because he starts to understand how to connect with other people, and obviously there's, like, barriers of, like, he's synthetic, he's dealing with a lot of organic beings, all that kind of stuff. There's a barrier there that he kind of has to surmount, and he also has to, like, understand emotions to some degree. Not to say he didn't, like, have them initially, because he definitely did, but, like, to a lesser degree of, like, a Data from Star Trek, he does have to, like, understand why people might react in one way or the other. And in particular, I think he has to learn how to be less aloof, because he definitely comes across like that in some of the games. In the PS3 games in particular, when Ratchet's trying to, like, figure out, oh, where did my people go, and, like, about myself, like, Clank kind of is very dismissive of it, to be frank, in the first, like, 2 or 3 games, where he's just kind of like, yeah, I know you, like, care about this, but I like if you try to embark on this, you're going to endanger a lot of people, and I don't think that's worth it. I think you need to give up on that kind of a quest. It's very selfish, blah blah blah. And to be fair, he has like at least some of a point. I have my disagreements on that perspective, but by Rift Apart, he's actually like, I actually understand now why he had this connection and why he was looking for these things, because I have listened to him and I have done reflection, and I actually want to help him do that now. Now that, we're theoretically not in the middle of this, like, life-changing event, I want to help you find your family if that's what you want. And again, I think that's like a testament to how he becomes more caring and also understands people better and understands like how to connect with them. And so it's a bit more of an understated arc, but I think it's still very much there. And he's definitely not the same character he was in the very first game. So I appreciate that like both of them have their own kind of journey that also like is influenced at various points by each other. Like they very much are the biggest influences on each other's lives and the direction that they're going. And they improve each other when they're together. So...
yeah, and that's the kind of thing you want to see. It would be really frustrating if, again, they return to the status quo after each fucking game.
Yeah.
But it's cool, because another reason I even think of the Let's Plays is because I kind of want to see them. I don't know if I'd want to play them, Some games, how do I put it? A game can age poorly in the gameplay department. Yes. But if you're already into it and you're comfortable enough with it, you're like, yeah, it's fine to me. But I'm still really curious to see how it plays out, which is why, for instance, I've had Steph play the original Resident Evil.
Yes.
Or at least the director's cut, where she can play that just fine, but me, I'm like, I don't wanna, but I really want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I have all the games, so... it could happen. I still got my PS3 that has I have the remastered PS2 games on PS3 because I never owned a PS2. But they actually they did a good job porting those over. Actually, like I was actually pretty impressed with how it ran and like all that stuff.
Good.
So yeah. I guess the last thing I'll just mention, I think it's interesting that they did also give Dr. Nefarious, who is the like main villain for a lot of the games, a character arc. Like he actually has a character arc of becoming a better person while still being a villain, and I find that deeply amusing. Like he starts off being very megalomaniac, like that kind of a person, and when he initially crops up later in the series, again he's still a villain, but he has at least like he's kind of elevated his understanding of like the world and people around it, and this kind of feeds into this. I guess they call it a spinoff. It's technically still canon, all this stuff. There's a multiplayer game called All for One that he's in where he's one of the 4 player characters. And so you're probably thinking like, what the fuck? They let you play as like this villain guy? Well, the way it ends up going down is that he's trying to do another like villainous scheme, and he fucks it up spectacularly badly. And they all get kidnapped. Him, Ratchet Clank, and Quark. And they all have to work together to escape this like alien planet that they've been like stuck on or like been abandoned on. And like he actually like develops some really interesting connections with all the other characters. So by the end of it, he doesn't like really want to do the villain thing even more, even though he feels like that's still kind of his role to play in life. Oh. And so it's a really fascinating game from just like his character arc in it. Like he's got they did a really good job writing that. And then, you get to the most recent game where he shows up again, and he's like, yes, he's kind of the main villain, but like his whole impetus is like, I lose all the time and it fucking sucks. So I'm just going to go somewhere where I like am like guaranteed to win because that's how the dimension is set up. And spoiler alert again, maybe skip this part, but like turns out he's actually still going to lose in that one too, because he was just kind of being a seat warmer for the actual Nefarious of that galaxy who actually wins all the time, and he kind of gets like treated like shit again until he has a moment again at the end of the game where he's like, actually, yeah, this was all a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have like teamed up with you. Fuck you. You can go to hell and die. And then he just fucking goes off into the sunset. So I don't know like what the future games will hold for him, but like it's very clear that he's again not the same person he was in the first game and has actually like become a better person, even if he's still like fulfilling the villain role. And again, I think that's a really interesting nuance to do with the character that is ostensibly the main face of like evil for your game franchise. So
I think that's good, and I really do hope that they follow through on giving him an actual character arc. And if he's seeming like he's got more agreeable stance, and he seems to be changing his mind on why he should stop doing that stuff. He should stop trying to take over the universe because it ain't gonna happen. Because for so many reasons. Yeah, there are so many things that I like that never get an R.
I know. I'm sorry. And he literally goes from like, I want to like mass forcibly like control everyone everywhere to I would still like to rule the galaxy, but maybe I'll just like use some time travel shenanigans to do that. To okay, fine, I'll work with other people, I guess, and become a better person. And then finally, okay, I do still want to be in charge, but I'm literally just going to go to a place where that's already happened and just like take over the position. I'm not even going to do anything else. Like there is a progression there in terms of getting better. He still wants to do bad things, but he's gotten better.
Trying to cut corners and how to take over everything. Involves less force and more
less bloodshed.
All that kind of shit. Like, hey, the world where he runs shit is an oppressive authoritarian regime, but how he got it somewhat morally better.
Yeah,
is weird. It's fucked up.
Very weird. It's so funny. There's like some very clear like analogies to like Amazon as a company in terms of how he's running like the main planet, and I think was obviously very intentional, but is also very funny and kind of depressing if you think about it a bit too hard. But yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know. I love these guys. I think about them a lot, as you can probably tell.
I'm appreciating it more because I remember Ratchet and Clank in the periphery of my consciousness as video games. Anytime they came out with a new one, I'm like, oh yeah, another Ratchet and Clank game. But I didn't think about it much else. Maybe I would think to why they keep making them. I never knew if they were very good or very bad, but they kept making them, and now I can see the charm, even more.
Yeah. They definitely have a good charm to them, and a lot of the platformers from the PS2 era are no longer made. So I'm very thankful that, in terms of the franchises from that era, that Ratchet and Clank is still kicking. And obviously I know it's partially because Insomniac likes them and also partially because it still makes money. But, I am just glad that we've been given the opportunity to like continue to see them develop that story, because it very easily could have stopped by now. They could have easily like just completely moved on. And, to some degree, like Insomniac as a studio has moved on somewhat in terms of like shifting their focus now to being like, we're making Marvel games now because we're good at that. And I'm very excited for that too. Don't get me wrong. I really like what they're doing there. But they also haven't given up on Ratchet and Clank. They still are making them, somewhat much slower than they used to, but still making them. And I just am genuinely very appreciative of that because I love my lombaxes.
Continue to love them. They've earned it.
They have.
I'm thinking the next game should probably be... Oh, man, what... So a couple of ideas. One would be an idea that goes off the rails, maybe turning everybody into a lombax or something like that. And it could be, I don't know, it could just be an experiment that is successful, but then somebody with ill intention ends up taking it and running amok with it. So it's just like, didn't you want your people back? Why is there a problem with me? It could be an obsessed fan. It could be an obsessed fan.
I have thought about that before. Yes.
Yeah, who wants to be a lombax too? Is like, I want to be just like my hero. I want the world to be a better place. And it's like that. But I'm me. And why would you? No, you don't understand. You're not the hero I thought you were. And it becomes just misery.
It's really funny you mention that, because there is a game in the franchise where the villain is a fan that's just gone like insane.
Wonderful.
So it's really funny you mentioned that because it's great. But also, I have had that thought before. My like little crackpot theory, which it's not really, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen, but if it does, Insomniac, call me. when they go to the lombax dimension, that's like they've really set it up as like that's going to be what's going to happen in the next game. I think it would be really funny if one of the protecting things around the dimension was that when you go there, only lombaxes can like exist there. So anyone who's not a lombax who goes there becomes a lombax, because that would therefore be the perfect opportunity to have Clank turn into a lombax. And I think that would be cool. And also other people. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, yeah.
I wonder if it would be funnier if he just was a robot lombax.
That would be funny. I think that would be hilarious. It's a cool idea, you know? So
yeah.
But yeah, I guess in closing, I think that it, as a franchise, has done a lot of really interesting things over the years. I think a lot of the stuff with the wackiness of their weapons has influenced a lot of other games in particular. And like TF was an important part of that, of their weapons, of the story, of the character development, and all those other things. And, I think for all of those reasons, it deserves to be considered a TF franchise. And anyone who disagrees can come fight me. We can meet in a parking lot, and, we can get into fisticuffs if that's what you fucking want. So
it's just a discussion, man. Why are you talking about fighting?
Because I mean, lombax,
parking lot
like
is a flat, even surface.
I have a wrench that I have that will fucking pack a punch. So I'm just saying, I'm a lombax with a wrench. What are you expecting from me? Of course I'm gonna fucking fight you.
If you steal Ratchet's wrench and you keep using it, the more kills you get, the more lombax you become.
Exactly. What, like, this is what I want. Someone write me this story, please.
I get ideas, and then I can tell you what happens after.
Yeah, exactly. But will it be a sequence?
For it to have the post content, yes, it would have to. Story's not over yet.
Story's not over yet. I don't know if you had any closing thoughts as well, Libra. I know a lot of this has just been me gushing about my favorite franchise, which I appreciate you being here for.
I'm okay with that. I did like hearing about all the stuff that you had to say. Again, it's furthers my appreciation for something in games that I probably haven't seen it anywhere, but I have no doubt that something like Ratchet and Clank had influenced other games. Maybe I didn't play them, or maybe I have and I never knew that was something.
Yeah.
Wild, wacky weapons. Who knows if that figured into something like the Gungeon. The Gungeon is all about taking references from everywhere and making it their own thing. Some of the nods are more like hitting you in the fucking face and it's funny, and others are like really subtle, where like, hey, that's an idea from so and so. And I love games, as I probably I act like, I only love Sonic, but I love video games in general.
Yeah.
So when I get to learn about stuff, it's enriching to me. It's a medium that I deeply value and that I want to keep engaging with, and I want to keep playing for as long as I can. Like hell, there's a new video. I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast before. Matt McMuscles is a YouTuber, and he does a series called What Happened, and released one today about The Bouncer. And I would love to know about that game. Just for those who don't know, it was one of the first PlayStation 2 games. It was made by Square Enix, and it was a third-person 3D beat-em-up. And it looked really cool in the commercials. And when I played that game, it was so fucking bad. It was really short. I didn't know what was going on. Those other things would have been fine, but I say it's a bad game because I had no idea how to play it. The combat was incredibly stiff. I felt like I couldn't do a 3-hit combo to save my life. I didn't know if it was me or the controller or whatever, but the game was just really fucking bad. But I was so curious, and I bought it used. Although I will have to say, there is a part where some woman inexplicably turns into a jaguar, and I don't know why.
Hey, no, we love that shit.
But hey, you know what? I'm also a little tangential, but a little related. So I mentioned like the woman turning into the big cat, and in Final Fantasy VIII, there is a bar that you walk into, and there's a TV screen, and it's just looping the same thing over and over again because it's a PlayStation game.
Yeah.
There isn't like they couldn't put like a full fucking show. They could put like 5 seconds of animations.
Yeah,
the game is
that.
4 discs long.
Yeah,
what the fuck, guys?
that.
But instead of leaving the TV blank, what they had playing was the face of a woman turning into like a Black Panther or a Jaguar and then changing back. And they had that morph looping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm thinking somebody at some point on that team really just wanted chicks to turn into a panther.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, I appreciate you. I get you. And I hope you get your wish for like something really fleshed out in a game. Join an indie dev, give them your experience and be like, I need to see this. And they'll be like, we'll work it in and it'll be good.
Oh my God, that's great. You know what? Just like the guy who got his giant mechanical spider, I hope that for them as well. Godspeed and good luck.
I'd like another panther, jaguar, or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
I'd like another one that isn't cat people. As good as that one is, I'd like to see something good. And I can't.
We do like diversity in our species,
Yeah, and I can't lean on Griff to hopefully make an animation one day that's like all like painstakingly blah blah blah. Come on, people.
I had to pause my Griff Orca.mp4 to come hear
it's
this.
A dolphin.
What is this? I know.
Did anybody else say Griff Orca before?
I think I did hear someone actually say that, and then I saw the person who made the meme of I had to pause my Griff dolphin whatever thing, and then I was like, I just have been mishmashing it in my head because I think it's funny, even though I know it's a dolphin.
Funny. I was just wondering, wait, I wonder why you're saying that. You certainly know better by now.
No, it's because someone did mistook it, and then I was like, now I'm gonna run with it. So
I got to make me some more Panther stuff in the future. I do miss it. I'm getting the juice back. I'm getting it. You people will see something in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I was gonna say I fucking started working on a personal manip for the first time in a year and a half.
Fuck yeah!
We'll see if I actually do anything with it. But the fact that I did anything,
things are happening.
Things are happening.
Yeah, it's very easy to overlook the fact that both of us are creatives and we like making shit. Even though we do this pretty much weekly, we got other shit we actually want to do. Yes,
but we are also, as creatives, making shit every week.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing both. Get artists who do both.
Yep.
Oh, man. Well, speaking of artists who do both, we got some interesting questions from some artists themselves as well that I figured we would make some time to go through. And the first question we have is from Galaxy. And Galaxy asks, you get TF'd into an animal that is unable to speak, and for whatever reason, you need help from someone, maybe someone to help you turn back. What types of strategy would you use to try to communicate with someone to help you get what you need?
That's kind of an open-ended question, because then I'd have to pick whatever I turn into, but let me see.
I have an answer if you want me to go.
Sweeping strategies. I'm just gonna fucking wing it.
Okay.
Sweeping strategies, of course, would be trying to write anything in any way possible. Making sure that I use my body language to, first of all, let you know that I'm either not afraid or not a threat. What else? If I can write in any way possible, it's going to make communication way easier.
Yeah.
And if and this would be interesting, if whatever body you end up as can interact with a touch screen.
Then you're off to the races at that point.
You can even do your own research, or communicate with anybody. It's there's a bunch of possibilities.
Oh yeah.
And
you don't even necessarily even need a touch screen. I mean, if you tap into something and you're maybe at home, I mean, keyboards, you could potentially be able to use one of those, if you're very careful. Yes. And
yes, that's true. I was also thinking in terms of if you can't be at a seat or if you can't be at a keyboard for any reason, a touch screen is just another way of doing it. But if you got dainty enough digits or something, or enough force, or if you can exert enough force to actually push a key in. So that's why I thought of a touch screen You know,
that's a good point, actually.
Because strong or weak, if you register, you can use it.
Yeah.
And it still has internet connection.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You'll definitely have to hope that's still there. It's funny. So I think you covered most of the things I would say. One thing I'll also add, one of my exes actually used to have, like, a Scrabble, like, magnets on their fridge, basically. And so the joke sometimes was, like, if I had, like, transformed into, like, a small animal or something, let's say, for example, a fly, that was one that came up. Well, I could, like, land on the letters, like, individually to try and spell something. So if you look and see a fucking fly that's, like, jumping from different letters that are clearly trying to spell something out, you'd be like, oh, okay, hold on, let me, like, pay attention. What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
So I always thought that was kind of funny. Obviously, like, with some animals, like, if you were, like, you know, outside or something and you were like a horse, like, maybe you could, like, draw, like, stuff, like, letters into, like, the dirt or something.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, most of the things you said, I'm like, I would echo that, honestly.
Yeah, in terms of writing, that's also what I mean. Like, are you a giant thing that has zero dexterity? Are you an ungulate or something like that? Scratch that shit into dirt. If
you're a sea animal, you're kind of fucked, though.
Yeah, if you're a sea animal, I don't know, will you ever be seen again? You have to avoid people a lot, depending on what you turn into.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, beaver is fish.
You just want to eat meat. Just admit it.
Beaver is fish. Capybara is fish. Lizard is fish. This is not me. Everyone, this has been a public announcement from the Catholic Church. Beaver is fish. Capybara is fish. Iguana is fish. I don't know why.
Because they want to eat meat. And they're desperate to fucking keep eating meat. Just eat it. Just eat it. That would make Jesus sad. Jesus is dead. I think he got about as sad as he was gonna get. He's okay now. Fucking stop it. I'm not gonna upset him now. Everybody did everything in the fucking world to upset his ass and then kill him. When he wasn't gonna die, he was just... People were shitting in his temple, pretty much. Are you telling me now is the time? Because you people feel guilt.
Listen,
Catholic guilt.
Listen, it's the Catholic guilt is terminal, okay? And it is important for me to know that on certain Fridays I should eat beaver. Apparently, thank you, Catholic Church.
You're not supposed to eat them on any Friday, apparently.
No, that you're allowed to eat fish. That's the whole point. So that's why they were like, beaver is fish, capybara is fish. That means you can therefore eat it on Fridays and Lent.
Shut the fuck up.
I swear to God, that's why. That's why the Catholic Church was like, these things are fish. If you don't believe me, look it up, y'all. Look it up. Beaver is fish.
I just reject it.
No, I know you believe. I'm saying to the listeners, look it up. Beaver is fish. Iguana is fish. Capybara is fish.
And fish
I don't make the
insulted.
rules.
Why
I know.
You treat all those things better than fish.
Well, anyways, speaking of beavers, we have a question from Galen, and Galen asks, in terms of taste and or personal identification, are there differences in the species that you gravitate towards for TF content, like feral stuff versus like more standard non-TF anthro content?
Okay, I'm going to go by the standard of anthro that furries go by.
Okay, sure.
Don't really like furry stuff because you're
not a furry.
Well, yeah, I'm not a furry, but also just most of the time the way it's done. Growing up, I looked at it and I'm like, I don't get it. And these days I'm still like, I don't really get it. It doesn't spark anything. It's not that a furry character or furry design can never be attractive to me.
Yeah.
But on the whole, it's just not something for me. So if I'm going to talk about transformation, like furry would be fine, but I'd rather just do the feral thing because then I'd get more transition in general and stuff, and I get to see like, you know, all the distortions of the body that I find really appealing. Plus, I mean, feral kind of implies like monstery stuff, and there are monsters that could have really interesting forms, or at least something vaguely humanoid, which I am very on board with. And so, like, yeah, I'll go into feral in that regard.
Yeah. I think when I'm, like, thinking about the differences I have, I mean, like, from a species perspective, I think with, like, with anthro stuff in particular, for non-TF anthro stuff, like I very much gravitate towards like big cats in general. I think when it comes to like TF anthro stuff, I mean, I obviously gravitate towards like alien species like lombax and turian and stuff like that. I think I'm also pretty like reptile happy when it comes to like anthro TF stuff. When it comes to like feral TF stuff, again, I know this is a funny like combination of words, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Like when it comes to feral stuff, I like pool toy TF. I consider that of like, you know, like ones that are like fully immobile and they're like, you know, depicting like an animal, like a normal animal on all fours, that kind of thing. That's what I think of when I think about like feral content that I really like. It's feral pool toys.
Are you using feral as a catch-all term for something that is completely away from being anthropomorphized in some way?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it as like on all fours, basically. And that can mean a variety of different things. It can definitely be monstrous, in my opinion. Feral is absolutely monstrous. It can also be like something that's just a normal animal on all fours. It can be a pool toy. Like it can encompass a lot of different things. It's not anthro, is I guess how I see it.
Interesting use of the word.
Yeah,
wouldn't have thought to use it that way. Also, I didn't give a species. I don't know. I'm very, very based on a mood. I really like feline stuff. You know what's an anthro thing that I can get behind more often than I've noticed is rabbits. Rabbits make for very appealing like anthro traits. There are like even some furry like rabbit girls that I found like, oh shit, you know, I dig it, and it's just like the contours that come from that. But of course, it's got to be a certain way for me. But yeah, big cats. I still like dragons because dragons are just another kind of monster.
Oh yeah.
And
Year of the Dragon, baby.
Yeah, give me frog monsters and stuff like that. But if you want the more interesting answer, like I find myself liking rabbits sometimes. Oh yeah, horses too. Horses are like a vice for me. Yeah. Shout out to Vosh.
Oh man. The last question I have here is, it had an interesting journey to get to us, actually. So this question was originally posed by Ringo/Straighttail on Telegram and then forwarded it to us through Fire. So thank you to both of you. Okay. So Ringo asks, a new streaming service comes out where you can watch anything on their service and you'll be TF'd into something that matches whatever it is you're watching. You will, however, turn back into your normal form once you finish watching the program. So the question is, what is the first thing that you would watch, and do you actually finish it? So I guess for the purposes of this question, we have to pick something that exists to watch, and then explain what the associated TF would be, and then would we finish watching it? Like, would we go back to humanity?
Yeah, because what matches it?
Because like I got an easy answer. I'm going to go watch the fucking Ratchet and Clank movie, and I'm going to become a lombax, and then I'm never going to finish the movie because that movie's not actually that good anyways. Boom, done. Like, that's an easy one. I'll think of something more interesting, but like that would be my first answer. I'd be like, easy peasy. I get exactly what I want. Everyone's happy.
Oh my god. What the fuck would I pick? I mean, I guess it would be like the character, or at least the body of the character, or
or like an animal species,
or
you know.
It could be anything from the movie. So I'd have to be careful, because then if I want to go by that, it could be very evil genie. But like, you know, that thing that's in there for just a few frames. You're gonna be that, and it's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Something that I'd want to watch. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. You have a more creative answer?
Yeah. So like, I was thinking about it. I mean, I feel like a lot of people would be like Zootopia or Robin Hood, because like there's like lots of really good anthro type characters you can get out of that. Or, you know, someone would say like one of the werewolf movies, you get a good werewolf form. I think those are kind of like good, but I think they're low hanging fruit. The kind of, I guess, like quote unquote interesting answer I would give.
Oh, I just had a thought.
You go. I'm trying to pick up my...
I just had a thought, and it fucking works. It fucking works, and it could be fun, and it could be anything. Oh my god, it's perfect.
Go.
Delicious in Dungeon.
Oh my god, you're right.
I can watch that. Everything in there is so fucking cool.
Damn.
I'd be hard-pressed to lose.
Yeah,
That's what I would watch from beginning to end.
Would you finish it, though?
Yes, I'd have to. I haven't even started watching it. I read the whole manga, as I have said in previous episode, the one with Luminous Shift. Please watch it. Yes. I would watch that. Whatever happens, I'll deal with it. Unless it's a dragon, then oh no, rest in peace, my house. Unless no, you haven't gotten to that part. And yeah, that's my answer.
About. Okay. I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm just gonna nod. The more interesting answer I would give, in my opinion, is Monsters Inc. Because you don't know what kind of monster you're gonna get. It could be anything, but you know it's gonna be monstrous, and therefore it's gonna be fucking cool. I think I would be happy with pretty much anything that came out of that, because it would be unpredictable. I don't know what I would be getting, but it would be interesting. And then I could decide if I want it or not. And if it's not the monster I want, well, I got the TF, that's cool, now I'll TF back. And maybe the question didn't specify this, but maybe I go back and watch it again and I get something else. Maybe it's a different one every time. I don't know. So maybe I'll just keep going through until I get something I like.
Oh man, you know what would also be really interesting to fuck with would be real monsters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those things are weird and they defy logic and and they're just concepts come to life pretty much. Also, they can all essentially transform to some degree in order to do the scares that they do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they can body horror their ways into kind of some other versions of themselves. I remember how Ickis could bulk himself up and he'd become more terrifying. His mouth would get even bigger and he'd get more teeth and shit like that. And I'm yeah, you could get even more out of that.
Fuck yeah.
But I still pick Delicious in Dungeon though.
That's a very good choice. Very good choice.
Everybody should read that.
Everybody
should read it. Everybody movement. Everybody read it.
Well, awesome. That was all the questions we had. We don't have a guest, so I don't... Do you have any questions for me, Libra? I don't know.
The head and the back. Actually, are you going to fill your background up with more shit? I think that would be a fun little project to do. So
that would be nice. Obviously, this will not be part of the recording, but I have Equinox behind me now in my room when I am... have my webcam on. It's interesting because I actually have a really nice cabinet with a lot of stuff in it. I have my Magpie Bones SNEF mask and everything, but it's parallel to my webcam, so you don't really see it in the background. So I don't know what I'll do if I want to change around the orientation or whatever. But
you could always turn the camera.
I could.
I would say you could turn the camera if you want. And then you kind of get the little effect. Being off to the side is visually appealing.
Yeah.
That's how I think of it. Little framing. Yeah. Oh, what's that stuff here?
That's if you convince me to go into streaming.
I like being able to give people who are on webcam with me something interesting to talk about, which has happened before in my previous job. I always liked it when people were like, "Oh, what's that?" And I've gotten to mention Berserk and Gundam and other stuff and just been it works. It's great for conversation. And for any future guests, if you may be joining, you could get to see our fucking faces and some of the stuff that's by our setups.
Like Frog Detective.
Frog Detective is set up in a really cute way now.
Yeah.
I love it.
He's great.
And
everyone should play Frog Detective.
Yeah, it's 3 to 4 hours of combined game time across all 3 games. It's so good. But first read Delicious in Dungeon or Berserk. Bing, you got one.
Saving it right for the end. Had to get in a Berserk mention right at the end.
Man. What is it? Keep an open mind and everything like that.
Yeah.
Take care
Everyone
of yourselves.
should. Yeah,
Keep
drink
an open
water.
Mind.
Sleep
You're
well.
not alone in this abyssal darkness.
Stay TFy.
Yeah, we'll see you next time, everybody.
Hell yeah.
Night.
This thing's pretty big up close.